Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And before getting into today's lesson and going into Isaiah the 51st chapter, I just wanted to highlight a tool in the Blue Letter that I came across today while just messing around with it. And I'm not sure if brothers already use this, or if you're already familiar with it, but it is this multiverse retrieval right here. And it's just as it sounds. It basically allows you to pull up multiple verses without having to open many different tabs. You can just pull them up and they'll be sort of in line over here. So an example, which I'll show, that I'm going to use here for Isaiah 51 is down here. You would enter the sequence of precepts that you want. So I'm going through Isaiah the 51st chapter, but say I get to a particular verse here and there's a precept that lines up with this, maybe the 5th verse, rather than having to open a new tab and then open that precept and then switch between tabs by just typing in here, right? First from Isaiah 51 and 1 to 5, and the precept that I want for the 5th verse, I could just basically plug it in right in here and then continue from Isaiah 51 and 6 down to wherever I want. And then say I want to get another precept for that, I plug it in here. And once you hit retrieve, this is basically what it looks like. So you'll have the precepts you want, right? Isaiah 51 and 1 all the way on till 5. And then right under it is the other precept that I placed in here, right? John 12 and 37. So I don't need to, switch between tabs. I can just reference whatever precept that I want for whatever particular verse I want here, right? All in the same page. And once I'm done, I just continue back in Isaiah 51 all the way down. And, this can be helpful if, like, for example, I'm going through a chapter, but you may just have a handful of different precepts, right, that you're going to go through. So maybe you may be doing a lesson, and if you've already planned precepts ahead, you can just line them up, right? You can do maybe something like Revelation 13 and 16. And you can also maybe want to get Revelation, 16 and 2. I'm just throwing random precepts out here. And then maybe you might also want to pair that with Revelation 18 and maybe 4. So if these are the precepts you want for your lesson, you can just hit retrieve over here. And the page might look like this in the beginning, but if you just hit format tool view, then it starts to look like this. And then here you go, right? You have all your precepts right there. And then you can just basically just go off of that, if you want. And maybe it might make life easier for you if you find it useful, but just something that I thought I would share. So today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 51st chapter. And let's get right into it. Now in this chapter, right, it mainly goes into the Lord comforting Israel, right, speaking those comforting words onto Israel as to how he would deliver them or deliver us, right, from the state of being destitute, and basically not to fear, right, but to put our trust and our faith in the one true living power who is capable of all. Okay. So this is the book of Isaiah chapter 51 verse 1. Hearken to me, ye that follow after righteousness, ye that seek the Lord. All right. And unfortunately, this isn't the whole entire nation, right? You have a good majority of our nation that don't seek and follow after righteousness, and they don't seek the Lord. But there is a remnant, a particular few that have been chosen by the Lord who would follow after righteousness, or at least desire to, and seek after the Lord, and are doing so now. And those are the elect. Look unto the rock whence ye are hewn, and to the hole of the pit whence ye are digged. And this is just basically saying, look back to your origin, because it is likening Israel or those here to a rock that is cut out of a stone that is cut out of a rock, hewn out of a rock, or digged out of a pit or a quarry. I think that's how it's called. Quarry. Yeah, something like this. A quarry is an open pit mine where materials like stone, gravel, and sand are excavated from the ground for use as building materials. Right, so it's basically saying, look from where you were cut out of your origin. And then Isaiah expounds a bit more what he means by that, by now referencing Abraham and Sarah, which we know of Abraham came Isaac, and of Isaac came Jacob, from who the 12 tribes of Israel, right, or the 12 tribes are formed from those patriarchs. So this is verse 2. Look unto Abraham your father, and unto Sarah that bare you. For I called him alone, and blessed him, and increased him. And if you read the book of Genesis, you get the context of Abraham's history, right? And how his, I believe it was his father that worshipped idols, but the Lord called Abraham, from Ur of the Chaldees, and took him out of there into the land which he promised to give to him and his descendants, i.e. the land of Canaan. So as it says, and increased him, hence his name was changed from Abaram, father exalted, or exalted father, to Abaraham, which is a father of a multitude, or many nations, you could say. Verse 3, for the Lord Yahweh shall comfort Zion, which represents Israel. He will comfort all her waste places, and he will make her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of the Lord. Okay, now we know that the Lord, when dealing with Zion, right, it would first begin with the people, but you're also going to have the actual land that will be beautified, right? But the Lord is going to comfort Zion, starting with delivering the remnants that seek him, beautifying them, right, changing them, cleansing them, and then also the land, okay, which at that time, or even now, right, but during the end, it's going to be waste. It's going to be destroyed. It's going to be likened unto a wilderness. But as it says here, the Lord is going to make it like Eden, right? And her desert like the garden of the Lord. So the Lord is going to restore that land back to being a paradise, right? Pretty much back to like how it was in the beginning. Joy and gladness shall be found therein, thanksgiving and the voice of melody. And that's not being found therein right now. Right now, it's violence and war and destruction. But why is joy, gladness, and thanksgiving going to be found therein? Because the right people, right, the true inheritors of that land are going to be taken back there, and the Lord is going to use Israel, right, starting with obviously the order, Yahushai, the 144,000, and the rest of the elect, to institute righteousness. Verse 4, hearken unto me, my people, and give ear unto me, O my nation, for a law shall proceed from me. And when you go into that law, we have, of course, the actual law, statutes, and commandments of the Lord, which are, which we follow. But when you also go into the word law over here, it goes into instruction, right, direction. And here it says a body of prophetic teaching, okay, which is also likened onto what? A doctrine, or instruction in the Messianic age, which that instruction came by what? By the doctrine, which Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai put forth, and ultimately is being taught now. Okay, so going back to verse 4, for a law shall proceed from me, and I will make my judgment to rest for a light of the people. All right, so the judgment of the Lord by which justice is brought forth will be made a light for of the people, right? Which people? Israel. And that light would be that light or that path, really of instructions to lead and guide us. Verse 5, my righteousness is near, my salvation has gone forth, right? So the salvation of the Lord is on its way. In fact, there's a precept which I forgot to load on here, but you know what? Why not add it on here? Which mentions, matter of fact, actually, I got word search it, so it's fine. I'll open a new tab for it. But there's a precept that mentions that, yeah, our salvation is nearer than when we believed. Romans 13:11, and that knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. See, so that salvation is on its way, as the Lord said. And mine arms shall judge the people. The isles, which represent the islands, shall wait upon me. Now we know the actual islands, the land themselves, are not going to be doing the waiting, but it's the people. And these people are referring to Israelites that are scattered in these different regions that believe, right, that are of the elect. They're going to wait upon the Lord in sincerity and in hope. And on mine arm shall they trust. Okay, and so and this is symbolic as well. Okay, because that arm of the Lord represents who? Yahushua, right? Yahushua is likened onto the arm of the Lord, of the Heavenly Father. And the precept for that is what's following here. That's why I linked it in here like this. This is the book of John, chapter 12, verse 37, where John quotes what Isaiah says, not here, but in another precept where he mentions the arm of the Lord. And this is how we prove, or we know, that that arm is symbolic for Yahushua. John 12:37, but though he had done so many miracles before them, which is referring to Yahushua and what he did, yet they believed not on him. And why? So that the saying of Isaiah, which is referring to Isaiah, of Isaiah the prophet, might be fulfilled. Now, what saying is that should be fulfilled by people not believing on Yahushua? Which he spake, Lord, who hath believed our report, and to whom hath the arm of the Lord been revealed? Meaning the arm of the Lord, which was Yahushua, wouldn't be revealed to many, which is why they didn't believe on him. But now you might say, well, if he was revealed, how wouldn't he be revealed to many? Because didn't those that didn't believe on him, didn't they still see him? Well, that revelation wasn't by sight, but by spirit. So when Peter confessed, right, that Yahushua HaMashiach was the Messiah that was for to come, it was revealed unto him. That's why Yahushua mentioned that flesh and blood hath not, revealed this to you, but the Heavenly Father. That is how the arm of the Lord has been revealed, when you are able to see and believe that Yahushua is the anointed, right? Believe on him, not just by physically seeing him. Okay. So John was quoting here to say, what Isaiah has said, what prophesied about who hath the arm of the Lord been revealed, right? It was to babes, it was to a few. And that's why most people didn't believe on the arm of the Lord, which was Yahushua. Therefore, they could not believe, because Isaiah said again, he hath blinded their eyes and hardened their heart, meaning their mind, that they should not see with their eyes, nor understand with their heart, and be converted, and I should heal them. But this doesn't mean they were physically blind, they were spiritually blind. So they couldn't perceive and understand and receive that information that was given to them, or being taught to them, that Yahushua was the anointed. And that was for the sake that the Lord didn't want them to convert and be healed because they were wicked. And so they wouldn't have done it sincerely. Verse 41, these things said Isaiah, when he saw his glory and spake of him. Right. So because he foresaw it, he saw it before it happened, and he prophesied about it. So continuing on back in Isaiah 51:6, lift up your eyes to the heavens and look upon the earth beneath, for the heavens shall vanish away like smoke, and the earth shall wax old like a garment, and they that dwell therein shall die in like manner. Right. And this is it's in line with the precept, right? That's written, I believe it's in the New Testament, it's written as, I think Yahushua might have said it, right? That though heaven and earth pass away, yet not one jot, right? One jot or one tittle shall not pass from the law, right? Or from the word of the Lord. And that's basically what's being said here, right? That the heavens that you see and the earth that you are walking on, they would pass away, right? They could pass away. The heavens could vanish away like smoke or vapor, and the earth can wax old and perish, right? Like a garment, clothing that gets old. And similarly, the people that dwell on the earth, because the Lord likens our lifespan onto like a vapor, like a vapor, you see it temporarily, and then it goes just as fast as it made its way there. Okay, and that's the process of human life, right? You grow old, and before you know it, you're gone. And though this may happen, yet, as it says, but my salvation shall be forever, and my righteousness shall not be abolished. And this is mentioned to emphasize the firmness of the word of the Lord, that nothing would hinder it, not even time. So by the Lord mentioning and giving the word and promising that salvation and that righteousness, it would remain and come to pass unhindered. Verse 7, hearken unto me, ye that know righteousness, the people in whose heart is my law. And who are those? The elect. They're the ones who meditate upon these words and lay it to heart and think upon the Lord. They're the ones who know righteousness. Fear ye not the reproach of men, neither be ye afraid of their revilings, which is why we confidently and boldly go out there and do the will of the Lord, disregarding the reproach, the disrespect, the mockery, right? The insults of those that don't hear this, because the Lord said we shouldn't worry about that. For the moth shall eat them up like a garment, and the worm shall eat them like wool. And this is describing, like how nature unfolds. A garment gets eaten up, as it mentions, by moth. And when you actually look into the word worm here, it goes into moth as well. But just like they eat up and devour the garment, that's likened onto how these people are going to be devoured. So what the Lord is saying here by the mouth of Isaiah is, don't even worry about them. Like what the angel told Ezra, don't inquire, don't worry about how the wicked are going to be destroyed, but inquire how the righteous are going to be saved. So these people are already on their way out. Don't let their incredulity bother you. But my righteousness shall be forever, and my salvation from generation to generation. See? So that's why you remain, diligent in serving the Lord, because his salvation and his promise is always going to remain. But these adversaries to the word of the Lord, they're just temporary. So don't let that bother you. Verse 9, awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Right, as we read up above, right? Who is that arm? Yahushai. Awake as in the ancient days, because guess what? You have people that think that Yahushai, the Messiah, was only in existence or only came on the scene during the New Testament. But he was really all throughout the Old. Okay, but just most people didn't know that it was him, with at least the role that he had to come and play as the Messiah. But you'll notice there are precepts in the New Testament that mention how Yahushua expounded onto his disciples the things that were written of him in the law and in the prophets. Not just the things, that were prophesied of him, because the law goes back to the Torah, and the Torah is more than just the actual law, statutes, and commandments. It also contains history. Guess what? A part of that history, when you go back to the time of the Exodus, was Yahushua. He was the angel the Lord sent to deliver and to judge the Egyptians, but to deliver Israel and preserve them. So, as it says here, as in the ancient days, because Yahushua was there, in the generations of old, art thou not it that hath cut Rahab and wounded the dragon? Now, the word Rahab here, when you read it, it goes into, since I have an open tab here, I'm just going to pull it up. Isaiah 51, which, actually, I'm sure I can do it from here. Verse 9. That word Rahab is a symbolic name for Egypt. Okay, this is Isaiah making reference back to Egypt and really how the Lord used Yahushua to bring judgment upon them, being the arm of the Lord, which we'll get a precept for that too. But as it says, are thou not it that cut Rahab? Let's go into that right there. Or Rahab. It says breath, storm, arrogance, emblematic name of Egypt, right? An epithet of Egypt, a poetic name of Egypt. Okay, so that Rahab here, or Rahab, is referring to Egypt, and wounded the dragon, and that dragon is also referring to Egypt, right? Egypt here is likened onto a dragon in this verse, right? It says here, dragon, sea monster. And when you look in the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee lexicon, it tells you that down here, a serpent, it gives some precepts, a dragon, a crocodile, it gives some precepts, which is used as an image of Egypt, right? And the precept for that is Isaiah 51:9. So that dragon is just used as a visual to represent Egypt. And then you could say they were likened onto it at that time that Isaiah is making reference back to. Okay, but why does he mention the arm of the Lord being the one that cut Rahab and wounded the dragon, which represents Egypt? Well, let's go here to the Book of Wisdom of Solomon, the 18th chapter, because, you know, keep in mind, as the Lord plagued Egypt, one of the major plagues was the darkness, which came with death, right? Death of the firstborns. But the angel of death that was sent at that time was Yahushua. All right, so technically he is that arm that cut, okay, Rahab or Rahab and wounded the dragon, which represents Egypt. So this is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 18, verse 13. For whereas they would not believe anything by reason of the enchantments, so the Egyptians, because whenever the Lord sent Moses to Pharaoh to warn him to let Israel go, he would perform a miracle, but the Egyptians, their sorcerers, would also be able to try and replicate that miracle. So those were the enchantments in which they used. And because of that, Pharaoh and the people were like, well, whatever you can do, we can do as well. So we don't really believe what you're saying. It doesn't really hold merit or weight. However, upon the destruction of the firstborn, which came by that darkness, they acknowledged this people to be the sons of God. Because that when you actually read in Wisdom of Solomon, the 17th chapter, it tells you that even those people, those magi's and sorcerers, who usually the people would go to them to drive away their fear, these were sick by reason of fear. Verse 14, for while all things were in quiet silence, and that night was in the midst of her swift course, thine almighty word, and who is the word of the Lord? Yahushua. Go and read John, I believe it's John, the 1st chapter. Thine almighty word leaped down from heaven out of thy royal throne as a fierce man of war into the midst of a land of destruction. And so that was the fierceness, right, that the Lord, that Yahushua used, and the swiftness and the vehemency that he used to come down and bring that wrath. It was like a mighty man jumping into the midst of a land of destruction. And brought thine unfeigned commandment as a sharp sword. Right? What did we just read here? Art thou not it that hath cut Rahab? What do you cut with? A sword. As it says, that and brought thine unfeigned commandment as a sharp sword, and standing up filled all things with death, and it touched the heaven, but stood upon the earth, right? Because it was contained to that region. So coming back here to Isaiah 51:9, right? This is in reference to what Yahushua did, as we just read in Wisdom of Solomon 8:13. Continuing in verse 10, art thou not it which hath dried the sea, the waters of the great deep, and hath made the depths of the sea a way for the ransomed to pass over? So who are the ransomed? The Israelites. And we read in a previous chapter in Isaiah that the Lord said he gave Israel as oh, he gave these nations as a ransom for Israel, right? Basically, to preserve or to save the life of Israel, he gave up the lives of these nations, which is kind of like that what a ransom is. But as it says, and this lets you know that the Lord used Yahushai, right? Because he was in that chariot guiding Israel to perform these miracles, including that parting of the Red Sea, or the body of water. Though he commanded Moses to do it, that great wind, right? That wind had to have come from somewhere to push the waters, to create the wall on one side and then the dry land, right? The wall on one side and another side, and then the dry land that they could walk upon. All right. Verse 11. Therefore, the redeemed of the Lord shall return. Who are the redeemed? The elect of the nation of Israel, and come with singing unto Zion, which links up with Baruch. I believe the 4th chapter mentions that lo, thy sons come, whom thou sentest away, and everlasting joy. And in Revelation 15, it tells you that as well, that they sung. I believe it mentions the song of Moses, if I'm not mistaken, and of the Lamb. Because what? They're going to be delivered. So they're going to rejoice. Lord willing, we be of that number. And everlasting joy shall be upon their head like a crown. And that's to signify that the great joy that they would be in. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and mourning shall flee away, which is also mentioned in Revelation, the 21st chapter. So we know this is going to take place once the Lord comes to deliver his people, once his salvation arrives. Verse 12, I, even I, am he that comforteth you. Who art thou, that thou shouldest be afraid of a man that shall die? So the Lord is saying, look, I'm not just, I'm somebody, right? Inside joke. I'm not just anybody. Okay, I'm somebody. I'm somebody, right? That's what the Lord is pretty much letting it be known. Like, I'm the Most High. I'm the Creator. And so, like, as it says, who art thou that thou shouldest be afraid of a man that shall die? So because throughout the different captivities and just in general, oftentimes you can get beside yourself. You forget that the Most High is in control of everything. And so sometimes you'll have Jake that'll succumb through the fear of man, right, rather than remaining faithful to the Lord. But there are a few, right? There are a few examples of those that's why the Lord mentioned those that seek after righteousness hearken, because they're the ones that are going to listen. For example, even Susanna, when you read in the book of Susanna, she mentions that she would rather fall into the hands of the Lord than those wicked men. So they could go and make a false report all they wanted, but she'll take her chances with the Lord and remain faithful to the Lord than to actually commit adultery with them. See, so the Lord is saying here, why are you fearing man that's mortal, that can die? And the Son of Man, which shall be made as grass. And that's likening them to say that when you look at grass is, it's not rooted. It's not like an actual tree where you got to use, an axe or a chainsaw or, mass effort to uproot it, and it lasts a very long time. Grass is pretty frail. I mean, you can have even a baby grab, not to underestimate babies. They be having some of them strong grips. But you can have even an infant grab grass and just pull it out and pluck it. All right. So it's likening, the Lord is likening man or life to be frail. He's saying, I'm the one comforting you. I'm the God. I'm the Creator. You don't have to fear the man, the likes of this. Verse 13, and forgettest the Lord thy Maker, right? That hath stretched forth the heavens. And this is something that is also very important and crucial to keep in mind, especially going into these times, because Esau Edom, right, which is also a mortal man, the worst of the heathen, is going to use that fear tactic to dissuade many away from the Lord, away from keeping their faith in the Lord. By pushing the MOTB, I always say that it's not going to be that most people don't know or are unaware of the MOTB's relation to the Bible, or that it's something that is bad, but through desperation and fear, they'll still do it anyway. That's why it's likened onto temptation. If you're being tempted, but you're in an unknown state, it's not much of a temptation. The aspect of temptation comes in when you know, but you have to resist. Okay? That what's one example? There's a fine woman and she's giving you signals that she's interested in you, and she's very beautiful. And if you don't know or you're under the impression that this woman is available and she's single, then what's the temptation there? The only temptation is that beautiful body. But now, say you're made aware that this woman indeed does have a man and she is married, then it becomes more of a temptation, because now oh, I shouldn't even be talking or touching or not, even be having any dealings with this woman of any sorts like that. But now it's more of a temptation because you're aware that, okay, you should not be doing this. And yet the same thing she was doing before is tempting. Okay? That's one of the important aspects of temptation, is trying to get you to do something you shouldn't do. Okay? Or you're very well aware of, and there's a reason why you're not doing it, and now there are other reasons that are trying to entice you to do it. So Esau is he's going to use means like that and fear and so on to try and get a lot of people to submit, which is a general tactic that is used for control. But it's always important to keep in mind here, as the Lord is saying, not to forget your maker, the heavenly Father, right? The one that stretched forth the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth. So all the creations you see, it all comes from the Heavenly Father, and has feared continually every day because of the fury of the oppressor, as if he were ready to destroy. See? So the Lord is saying, like, I don't get it. I'm here telling you that everything is going to be okay. I'm going to take care of you, and yet you're quaking in your boots at this mortal man every day, as if he had a gun to your head, by the minute. And where is the fury of the oppressor? Which is a rhetorical question, but it's to emphasize that just as mortal as they are, their oppression, their power isn't going to be forever. But the power and the might of the Lord is. So fear the Lord and put your faith and trust in him, rather than being overwhelmed by the fear of man. Verse 14, the captive exile hasteth or hasteneth that he may be loosed, and that he should not die in the pit, nor that his bread should fail. And this is a relatively true statement, and can be applicable to us now, because right now we're likened onto a captive exile. Okay, and we're hastening to be loosed, yearning, hastening onto the coming of the day of Yahushua, so that we may be freed. Okay, and we're seeking the Lord, praying to him that we should not die in this pit, which in our sense, that pit will be likened onto this land. Okay, that we are yet this day in our captivity, nor that his bread should fail, which would mean what? Death. Because when your food or your bread or your sustenance is taken away, it fails, then you're left with nothing, and eventually you pine away. So in other words, we're praying now for that quick and swift deliverance, that we be not left here to die. Because if the Lord leaves us here, there's going to be no flesh saved. Verse 15, but I am the Lord Yahweh thy God, that divided the sea, whose waves roared. The Lord of hosts is his name, right? So the Lord is redeclaring that. Remember, I'm the one who divided the sea. I did that. Okay. And Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, right? Yahweh is the name of the Heavenly Father, and Yahweh Shai is the name of his Son. Verse 16. And I have put my words in thy mouth, and I have covered thee in the shadow of mine hand. Okay, which when you I think there's a precept that mentioned that the word of the Lord would be in our mouth as fire, and this people would. So even starting with Isaiah, right, who was prophesying all the way up until now, the words that we speak have been actually put into our mouth via our spirit, into our minds, from the Lord. Okay, and because of the need for us to teach, he has covered us, he has protected us, right, in the shadow of his hand. As the scriptures say, touch not mine anointed, and do my prophets no harm. That I may plant the heavens and lay the foundations of the earth, and say unto Zion, thou art my people. So how is the Lord doing that? How is the Lord saying unto Zion, which represents Israel, thou art my people? By way of his prophets, because they are the mouthpieces of the Lord. So he sends them out, putting his words in their mouth, or in our mouth, and we come out here and we give the message of the Lord. Verse 17, awake, awake, stand up, O Jerusalem, which has drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury. And we had to do that, right? The destruction and the suffering, the captivity, the slavery, and all the things that we went through were likened onto drinking a bitter drink that is poured out into a cup. And that bitter drink is symbolic for the anger of the Lord. And so by us drinking it, it was likened onto us suffering the judgment of the Lord. For thou hast drunken the dregs of the cup of trembling. See, so so as to where you may have like a cup of water, this case in the symbolic sense, the contents in the cup here are likened onto negative aspects of the Lord's judgment upon us, right? Like trembling or fury or fear. And here it says we've drunk the dregs, meaning the bottom part, the remains of it. We've emptied that cup and wrung them out, right? You completely when you have like some tea or something of that sort, as it gets to only the bottom part, you basically you shake it up a bit, right? I'm looking for the word that when you grab the cup and you rotate it, or you swing it around to mix up, the contents at the bottom, and then you drink it all. And that's how, that's what Isaiah is likening the Israel enduring the judgments of the Lord onto. Okay, so by us wringing out the cup, right, and completing the dregs thereof, it's likened onto us our punishment coming to an end, because we've drunk of that cup. Verse 18, there is no guide to her among all the sons whom she hath brought forth. The she here and the her is representing Israel as a nation, and the sons would represent the actual people, the actual Israelites, right? That's that metaphorical analogy of at times it's used where the nation as a whole is referred onto as like a woman or a mother, and the actual people are likened onto her children. And here it's saying, right, it's likening the condition of Israel having endured the different captivities and the judgments of the Lord as a rebuke or as part of his fury, is likened onto a woman or a mother who has lost so much that she doesn't even have any more sons whom can guide her, right, in her old age or in her time of need. Neither is there any that taketh her by the hand of all her sons that she hath brought up. And let's look at this in the NLT. And it says, not one of your children is left alive to take your hand and guide you. Okay, looking at the next verse. And then after that, we'll read it again in the KJV. But it says, these two calamities have fallen on you, desolation and destruction, famine and war. And who is left to sympathize with you? Who is left to comfort you? Okay. And that's highlighting the hardships that Israel had to go through. By verse 19, these two things are come unto thee. Who shall be sorry for thee? Desolation and destruction, and the famine, and the sword. By whom shall I comfort thee? Thy sons have fainted, they lie at the head of all the streets, as a wild bull or a wild bull in a net. Now, when we actually look into a couple of these words here, right, you look into the word fainted, and you look at you compare that to the state of Israelites today, it kind of lines up, right? Now, the word fainted here, when you look into it, it says to cover, to enwrap oneself, to disguise oneself, to faint. But in the Strong's definitions, or Strong's definitions, one of the words here is languid. Now, if we look up here the term languid, you notice it says here, of a person, manner, or gesture displaying or having disinclination for physical exertion or effort, slow and relaxed, weak or faint from illness or fatigue. And when you see Jake walking around today, that's pretty much what they look like. Okay, that's like the energy that majority of Israelites, walk around with. Some of them, you see it more on them than others, but it's not that of lively and jubilant, but more drained. Okay, you can see that Jake is pretty much worn out on in various different levels of it. Some worse than others. As it says here, they lie at the head of all the streets. Okay, the head of all the streets, meaning the corners of the streets, as a wild bull in a net. And I looked up here. Let's see, how does a wild bull in a net behave? And the AI definition says here, a wild bull in a net will behave with an initial display of violence, frantic thrashing, followed by exhaustion and resignation. This behavior is driven by panic, confusion, and the animal's natural aggressive temperament. Okay, and when you look at some of these words that were used here, it's similar to the energy and the attitude that you'll see some of these Israelites with, as they're grouped up in these street corners. And I'm not talking about teachers and prophets. I'm talking about just regular Jake with their pants sagging, smoking, drinking, and whatnot. And they're so quick, to threaten, right? So quick to be into attack mode. Okay, but at the same token, as we saw in here, the latter part is what? Exhaustion and resignation. Okay, go similar to what we read above about them fainted. Okay, seeing them drained, beat down, and worn out. So in essence, Jake is just in a messed up state. Okay, it says they are full of the fury of the Lord Yahweh, the rebuke of thy God. And what that means is, when you look at them, you can see the visual embodiment of the anger of the Lord and the rebuke of the Lord upon them, which is why they look in such a destitute and messed up state. Continuing in, where is it at? Okay. Looks like I put the precept above the verse, but anyway, it's fine. I can still reference it here. So Isaiah 51, continuing in verse 21. Therefore, hear now this, thou afflicted, once again referring to Israel, and drunken, but not with wine. Right, and the precept for that is Isaiah 29:9. Stay yourselves and wonder, cry ye out and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. See, and what that means is being drunken, but not with wine, is telling you that they're not physically drunk by intoxication of a actual liquid or strong drink, but they're exerting similar symptoms in a metaphorical way or in a spiritual sense by being drunk on different doctrines or philosophies, okay, that are making them behave in a manner that is likened on to being drunk or mad or inebriated. So people don't make proper judgments or behave in a godly manner after the ways that are required of the Lord, because they're in this drunken state, i.e., they're following after the ways that are not conducive to that of a true believer in Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai. So by believing on a false doctrine, your behavior and your way of life that you conform to this false doctrine is likened onto somebody that is drunk. So in the eyes of the Lord, when you think you're living this godly lifestyle, he looks at you as somebody that's staggering and throwing up all over the place. You think you're speaking wisdom, you think you're living a godly lifestyle, but really you're likened onto one that's, like a drunkard. Gets up and falls, stumbles, slurs speech. That's what you're like in the eyes of the Lord. Verse 22, thus saith the Lord thy God, or thus saith thy Lord, the Lord, right? Your Lord, your master, Yahweh, and thy God that pleadeth the cause of his people. Behold, I have taken out of thine hand the cup of trembling, even the dregs of the cup of my fury. Thou shalt no more drink it again. See, so at the end of it all, the Lord is saying, that cup of my fury and my anger that I made you to drink, which manifested as you being brought low and subject onto these nations, that they would use you as slaves, as servants, okay, and treat you in a horrible manner and overwork you and mistreat you and so on and so forth. No more are you going to have to drink of that again, which signifies that our captivity, right, and the sufferings that we are in would eventually have an end. And no more will we have to suffer them again, which is likened unto drinking of that cup. Verse 23, but I will put it into the hand of them that afflict thee. So the Lord is going to flip the experience. So rather than us being in captivity and being subject onto these nations, starting with Esau, because he's the number one afflictor of Israel, they will now have to serve this captivity and have to endure this affliction that they had put on us, which would be likened unto them now drinking of that cup, because the fury of the Lord was upon us for going astray from him, but the fury of the Lord is going to be upon these nations for putting their hands on us and harming and touching the apple of the Lord's eye. So they're going to have to drink of that cup, which have said to thy soul, bow down that we may go over, and thou hast laid thy body as the ground and as the street to them that went over, right? So we, because when we were under them, we were made that low, right? Complete servants, subservient to these other nations, some of the worst being Esau. In fact, there was actually a picture that I saw back during the time of slavery. You had an image where you had a young Israelite boy who was like laying on the ground, and you had an Edomite who basically was using the boy as a footstool. And the boy's job, I guess, was just to lay there as long as the Edomite wanted and just have his body be, the footstool of this Edomite. You see? And these were all part of those afflictions that we had to go through, but no more will we have to go through that, saith the Lord. And in fact, this will now be transitioned onto the enemies that have afflicted us. So that brings us to the end of the book of Isaiah, the 51st chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.